Well, once upon a time, not so many years ago, if your hobby was scratch building slot cars, particularly 1/32nd scale or 1/24th scale slot cars, and you really like to do open wheeled, open cockpit race cars, perhaps vintage cars from the 60s or 70s, when the famous drivers back then in real life were folks like Jim Clark and Graham Hill and Jackie Stewart and Jochen Rindt and Jack Brabham and Denny Hulme and Phil Hill. There was one place where you could get superb resin figures to really make your cars look realistic. And that was from Immense Miniatures, a company owned, operated by Marc and Heidi Tyler. And that company and those two produced a whole series of wonderful accessories for slot car racers and builders back then, including a stellar lineup of vintage drivers, or drivers from the vintage era. At least it was vintage for us. And so you could get, indeed, a Jackie Stewart figure, full figure, and it looked like Jackie Stewart. Or let's say you wanted Graham Hill. Well, you could get Graham Hill, or Jim Clark for that matter, or some of the others I named. But anyway, these were my go-to figures, resin figures, for the cars I like to scratch build, whether it was a 1967 BRM or a little earlier one, a 1963 BRM with these famous drivers. But I moved on, had to put my track away. It's in big boxes in the storeroom. Stopped scratch building slot cars, turned my attention to static models, particularly World War I airplanes, but oftentimes in 1/32nd scale. And there was always the challenge, where can I find decent looking pilots? You know, the saying goes, a static model plane doesn't fly itself. Of course, one could argue technically it doesn't fly at all. But you got to have a pilot, just like for a slot car, especially an open-wheeled, open cockpit. You've got to have a driver. Well, Marc and Heidi finished up the business with Immense Miniatures, and I discovered recently, I think I should have known this, that the figures, the lineup that had been produced by the Tylers was now available out of England from Colin Spark at RS Slot Racing. Well, fine, those are car driver figures. But as I was perusing the lineup, I discovered and remembered that Immense Miniatures had cast some driver figures, heads. You know, you can mate them up with generic figures, bodies of drivers from an earlier period. You know, the 1930s, 40s, with the soft leather helmets, open, not full bell helmets where you couldn't see anything of the driver. And in my mind, they looked, hey, I thought that might just do the trick in terms of being a source for heads for my World War I pilots. So I contacted Colin, placed an order, and ordered 5 sets. So a total of 15 heads, driver heads. And I was very pleased when they arrived recently. And I thought, I think they're going to look really good painted up and will be a source of supply as I work my way through my Wingnut Wings and Copper State Models airplane stash, slowly building larger World War I airplanes. But I think one of the tests to see, does the quality of the driver or the figure look as good as you think it does? Well, doing some zenithal priming dropping on some black primer and then an overspray of white to bring out the features confirms everything that I hoped for. Yes, these heads will do very, very nicely, mated with more generic, bodies. Because I always say, if you can get a good-looking face, that's pretty much what you're going to see anyway, or part of that face. What's particularly really great about this trio of pilots is in the mode that was done with the inset goggle features, so that you can actually do everything behind the lens of the goggle, paint it, get the eye detail, and then fill that in with the crystal clear or PVA glue or maybe some Future, and you've got a pretty nice figure. So yes, I've started the process now of painting up one of these 1930s racing drivers, but of course he's going to end up being a pilot in one of my many Wingnut Wings kits when I get another one finished. I'll just mate him up with some sitting figure that'll fit into the aircraft. Right now, I just started on this guy today. I've just put down the base colors, but I think these immense miniature racing driver heads from RS Slot Racing, and I'll put a link to that in the description. You can see here, copyright Marc Tyler there. And they are really cool. And if you are of the mind to say that you want great looking figures, in 1/32nd scale, which to me is the sweet spot, along with 1/35th scale for military figure painting, well, that's where to get them. I'm also going to put a link in the description of a video chat that Marc had a number of years ago with Jon Kit, where Marc and Jon talked about the immense miniature business at length and what the company was doing and how it came into being and what the Tylers were producing. It's really fascinating stuff. And I'm glad that many of these accessories and figures are still available, although you do have to get them shipped across the Atlantic if you're over on this side of the pond. All right. Well, I think this afternoon, put the finishing touches on this guy with shading and highlights, get the eyes painted in and then the lenses, and he'll be ready to go for a ride when I eventually build an airplane for him. Thank you for watching.